I think about the barriers and factors in the uh, kind of problems that they face. But I was wondering if, and you mentioned about this already, but I was wondering if you could expand on the factors or on what people rely to, what is the kind of social support they have, like formal and informal, in terms of when they deal with the mental health and the challenges they have. So,
So, well, basically, going back to the participants that I have interviewed and as well as for the GMBs, well, actually, first of all, participants are not that much aware of their own issues. They don't know if they are suffering from a mental health issue. All that they open up usually with their family friends about things that are like causing them their own life issues and the problems. Whenever it's like at the level where there are actual symptoms, they access the health system or they go to other sources. It can be a psychologist, it can be the health system, it can be also as well the religious people. So I did not mention this, but there are so many. It depends on the background, the level of education, and the knowledge of the person. It shapes their roots of seeking help. So there are so many factors that are being. Yeah.
I would just say we're now on live stream finally. If I just ask you to encourage just encourage to move the Starbucks cup from the side. If you just move the cup. You just move the cup,
okay.
it gives a bit.
Okay. Where do you want me to stand?
You're fine.
Okay.
It's a slightly strange angle. So just to say, anyone listening live or on recording, this is Ayn Nabhani in discussion following a presentation on group model building work in Lebanon with the Research Unit on Health and Fragility. Thanks ever so much, Aya, for your time with us. Can I ask a question about methodology while we're on that? There was a slide that you showed about the, I think it's called reference mode, which is when we ask people to estimate how they perceive a phenomenon to have changed over time, the frequency of referrals or the prevalence of mental health disorders.
You mean the graph section?
The graphs,
yeah,
that's right.
Okay.
And if I remember correctly, I remember you as an epidemiologist looking aghast at us asking for people's subjective impressions of that.
Yeah.
Because those estimations are inaccurate. They are.
Definitely they are inaccurate.
What's your position now in terms of the value of perceived trends over time rather than actual trends? Just where are you at the moment in terms of being able to wrestle with that? The notion of data and
quantitatively and epidemiologically, definitely I don't agree with what has been said at this section in the group model building. However, what was interesting are the factors that were identified and their awareness to certain events happening throughout the years that are convincing and leading to an increase in the prevalence of the mental health issues. For example, the thing about the National Mental Health Program, which is in 2000, I think 14, Ibrahim. It was in 2014, which is quite after the Syrian crisis. And the Syrian crisis was a major event that has led to an increase in the awareness of mental health issues. So this increase in the awareness, logically speaking, might lead to an increase in the prevalence of the mental health issues in the society because of the awareness of people and their knowledge about the topic and their ability to detect that they are suffering from this kind of issue. So epidemiologically or quantitatively wise, it's not convincing at all because we don't have the data and the estimates. But from a perspective of what's happening, it can really feed into what might be taken for our second phase, which is more into quantitative data and depending on the results. So
Can I just push you a little bit further on that, which I think where we're still swithering, I think is the right word, is that at the end of this project, when you are putting in proposals of your own, would you, under what circumstances would you want sort of mapping in terms of the quantitative data? What's actually driving this? What's the prevalence? Perhaps the number of health workers? Because we can use that methodology to plug in numbers and do real projections.
Mm-hmm.
But the tradition for this comes from Peter Hoffman is that it's the mental models, it's what people think's going on. It's the way that people understand the connections that's the most important thing. Even if, frankly they are wrong, or even if those, that his argument is it's the way that health workers and communities make sense of the world and they think this leads to this. And that's really, for us, really important to
I
know what
think
people
that
perceive
this,
to do it.
yeah.
I want, again, just wonder in terms of your methodological journey, where you'd link that sort of more conceptual, constructivist understanding with a sort of a more positivistic.
Yeah.
epidemiological
No,
one.
I don't know if I got you right, but I think that the qualitative part is going to be very essential and crucial for building up quantitative research questions for later research on mental health. So definitely it's giving us an insight of what are the major factors and challenges happening in Lebanon. And based on these findings, we can come up with research questions and hypotheses that can help us collect quantitative data and thus come up with a more generalizable and epi data that's more evident. Yeah,
Excellent.
so that.
So I just wanted to follow up on what Kanike was asking about earlier and your answer to that. So what we know is that in settings where people are not able to or do not want to use formal service providers for mental health issues and mental illness, the informal providers that you kind of mentioned there are actually really the informal providers. So these are people like the religious support, but also various kinds of healers, various kinds of people in the popular sector who are providing services. They're usually an incredibly valuable resource for people. So I just wondered, and I understand that the focus is not so much on them, but I just wondered in the way you conceptualize the study, what kind of role those play, and what people actually said about being able to use the informal providers in a way that actually help them to deal with the issues they face.
Yeah. So I don't know if I got you right, but informal providers, you mean the religious people and the other
and
sources?
other traditional or people in the popular sector who provide assistance to people. And I guess this links to an explanatory model.
Yeah.
So if you don't believe that you have a mental illness that requires, psychotropic medication, then you would seek other types of providers.
Yeah. So I don't know if I'm getting you right, but the informal provider, they are basically the religious people, and I don't know if people consider family friends are the main source of providing support and health issues, and this is basically because they do not realize that they are actually suffering from a mental health issue. So that's why they seek this route in order. It depends on their perceptions and on their own beliefs. Some people believe that they should be suffering and struggling and they should be patient, and that's why they go to religious people because of misconceptions. So yeah, it depends again on the level of knowledge and awareness of the participant, and it's a main factor.
Okay.
Did I answer you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I think, so we allowed, in the group model building sessions, we asked very openly where would people go for help. We didn't say health, actually, that was a big kind of issue we had. And so actually that did not come up. So that was interesting to us because in Sierra Leone and other places we've seen that, and that's the predominant revenue source of assistance. But here, I think you're absolutely right. People were immediately, we go to friends, family, we might go to the sheikh or whatever name you want to give it. And then we eventually go to the system, or we deteriorate. And the deterioration journey was very well described, as in people were saying, okay, we get worse over time, we've seen this happen in the community. But there was very limited, we go to, because there's this level of, and I think you glossed over it, there's a critical variable there at the core, the fear of somebody in the community compromising confidentiality.
Yeah.
And so because of that, they repeatedly said it's only those very few trusted people, but it's not a source of, it's not an informal provider as such. They did it in any of the groups.
Okay, I just want to make one small minor point. It's just about the fact that you said that they have misconceptions. So I just wanted to say that from a more sort of medical anthropological point of view, we would probably say that that there's a range and a continuum along the way. Of course, there are very serious biomedically mental illnesses that require medication, but there are many interpretations of why people experience the symptoms they do, if the explanatory model makes sense and you define it as a spiritual problem, then to go to a health service provider, a formal health service provider, wouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question about the selection of the population. You said it was purposely sampling and snowballs.
Snowballs, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the characteristics of the population? Because I mean, it's you compare Beirut and the Bar, and they're very different, but they're also demographically and culturally and socially very different. So can you tell us a little bit more about what kinds of population groups you were able to tap into, and how in the GMBs, for instance, their health-seeking behaviors, or even their interpretations of, the definitions of what mental health issues were, how did these differ?
Okay. So for the recruitment part, again, when I mentioned that they are most of them from the lower socioeconomic groups. We went to primary healthcare centers, and it's very well known that PHCCs in Lebanon are accessed by this low socioeconomic group class. So there's a bias. Most of them were women, and they were mothers of children. But we did not talk about their background because our eligibility criteria was very limited. We asked if they are interested in the topic and if they are men or women above the age of 18. So we don't have the actual characteristics. For the group model building, it was the same. So it was like the same recruitment strategy, but it depends on the availability of a person to sit for a long day workshop or for a just 20 minutes interview. And that's how we recruited people. For the Syrian refugees, all of them were, we did interviews in the tents. So they were definitely from very low socioeconomic class. For the UNHCR, they were also the same. So I think we have a biased group of participants for the both methods, for the GMBs and the semi-structured.
Can I follow that up with two questions? I mean, I think it's really good that, you say bias, but actually it's good
Yeah.
that you talk to these people.
Yeah.
I forgot my question. Yeah, two more questions. But
We'll come back.
But if I might add about bias, well, actually, when we talk about seeking behavior and even the ability to pay for healthcare in Lebanon, so these are the most disadvantaged categories in the population. So maybe targeting them, it's a bias if you are looking at the normal distribution of things, but it's not bias maybe when you talk about the most affected vulnerable affected populations. And I remember we had a lot of unemployed people because employed people were not available to join the GMB, but it was one of the factors leading to the mental health epidemic.
I wanted to ask a question mainly looking at from a communications perspective and health-seeking behaviour. So I wanted to know, you seem to allude to different actors like the official state and religious groups and maybe NGOs. So first I'd probably want to ask is how do they communicate with the audience or the population? How do they communicate with the population regarding mental health or health seeking? And does how they frame it affect, it's a bit beyond what you were looking at, but can you see an influence from that communication on how people seek health about mental health?
Can I assist?
I can think.
You can.
Which one of us? So I should say this is part of a two-part study where the second part is looking at the health system and more generally NGOs and systems kind of people who are delivering care. But so it's an interesting question we didn't really ask ourselves.
Yeah.
And I'm going to rely on all the Lebanese people in the room. So I think what struck me was the insistence in Beirut, particularly as a capital on social media and the role of social media normalizing conditions. There was a lot of awareness people had on autism and depression and anxiety, but that was not really the case in the car at all. People seemed aware of what they were, the conditions, or described them, I should say. They didn't name them, but they described them. But there didn't seem to be a sense most of the time that there was a...
So there seems to be more affluence in Beirut and Bakar. Do you think the affluence and maybe how it was approached might have affected the approach those people? Was it just, do you think it was more the audience didn't have the means to access the communication? So it seems to be a difference in people's knowledge. So is that upon that they weren't targeted the same, or is it a sense that their level of affluence maybe restricted their access? So is it how it was given, or was it how it was received that probably affected that?
I wouldn't say it's an issue of communication because even in the Bika area for NCDs, for example, we discovered that many people are connected still to any social media platform or to any national intervention. But it's about other factors. So maybe the level of stigma in the Bika, which is a rural area, is far above what's in Beirut. And from the communication perspective, if you'd like, at the governance level, well, I mentioned that it was about, this communication between stakeholders that created the National Mental Health Program back in 2015. And they have this task force, which led to one of them raising awareness around mental health issue, which improved the awareness at all levels, even in different parts of the country.
Absolutely, yeah. So it was the stakeholders. Would you say that they were quite cooperative in the sense that religious organisations, the state government, and NGOs were they willing to collaborate to come up with a
There's
consensus,
no
or was there
collaboration.
different frames being put out?
So because of the system is highly fragmented, and we're not talking about one system actually, we're talking about systems for housing. This is what IGHT people like to label it. So actually, for example, primary healthcare are run by NGOs, so they are part of this collaborative governance, if I may say. And then, so yes, when we talk about communication, all of them should be together to put something forward on the agenda or to move it into implementation.
At the risk of offending every Lebanese in the room, my understanding here is that Lebanon is characterised by relatively weak central state government.
Yeah.
And so I was just thinking, in answer to your question, within the UK, I think we would see that the last 2 years there's been a fairly major central state engagement with mental health. Recruitment of the royal family within that, there's that sort of quite strong government narrative, public health narrative. I think there's no equivalent of that within Lebanon because it's a much weaker system. There happens to be a key leader of the mental health program who's seen his job as sort of corralling the NGO sector that actually has more resources and more access to ensure that there's some common messaging and some coordination with that. Is that fair?
Yeah.
So that's a really good point. As you said, that the lack of affluence maybe resulted in stigmatisation rather than actual financial aspect influences the stigmatisation of that community that affected it. And the last thing, probably a bit more niche, but do you think that the religious groups, or even was there a stigma that came from them? That's a bit maybe assumptive, but was there sometimes the traditional perspective did that come into play at all? Or?
They might be part of the problem, but they are indirectly part of the solution because NGOs are tightly connected to whether a political party or a religious leader, and they are serving their communities. And if the Ministry of Health and other international and local stakeholders are trying to emphasize on, let's say, the mental health burden, then it's getting there. So via probably NGOs which are connected to religious.
So they act as gatekeepers in most cases.
Okay.
Yeah.
To an extent, is that I don't know if that. Well, I'm interested in why you say that's part of the solution, because that's precisely, these things might well be precisely what enforce stigma. If I'm from a particular community and my religious organization runs that NGO, that what would you call it, NPC, healthcare center, right? Then I know the person who's in that healthcare center. So I don't know so it's interesting. Then I wonder if this is something you also found, especially between Beirut and Bar, because you have to move quite a lot in the Bar, whereas in Beirut
The
you're in your
commuting
community.
issue was a major challenge for people in Bekaa area for seeking help. Yeah, it was.
But then if it's your own community who's providing your own mental health support, then that's part of the issue, is it not? Or is it, it's interesting to me that you said that was a solution. That was part of the solution.
Well, unless if you can do a whole reform to the system and you can move it into a primary health care funded by the government, or then this is the best solution. But talking about incremental change and what you have among very limited options, it could be the best solution. It's not the best solution, but this is how the Minister of Health and the partners are trying to move it forward. So, but again, maybe some PHCCs won't allow someone with a very biomedical perspective to go there because it's not aligned with their perspective of things. But usually, I mean, I don't know if it's the case or not, but usually if they are engaged in being part of any national program, they would be more, I mean, they would accept this view and this medical view of things.
Any other questions for
Thank you, Aya, for that presentation. Can you give us, please, more details about the strategy for Syrian refugees to face the discrimination? And what is the guarantee that this strategy will work while we see that
There's no guarantee.
the Lebanese leader, for example, Minister of Foreign, leads campaign against Syrian refugees? So can you give us more details?
About the strategy?
Yes.
First of all, the government is already have initiatives that is like increasing the discrimination among Syrian refugees. For example, the main example was students at schools were having like 2 different timings. So the afternoon is for Syrians and in the morning it's for Lebanese. So this added to the bullying part to children and increasing discrimination. So there are several initiatives that are done by the government that's already increasing this discrimination. Our recommendation, maybe there's more like awareness at schools levels or at different levels where it might increase the awareness and the acceptance within the community. We might be working at the community level, but at the governmental level, especially at the moment, there's like, and our politicians are trying, they are facing problems with Syrian refugees having them in the country, so I don't think it's going to work. This is a very transparent answer, and yeah.
Just build on that in terms of the method. I mean, I think these maps are really helpful for us, and with the discussion we had earlier on where there are, no matter which community you're from, there are some similarities of the challenges, and there are some differences. And it's whether we could look at any of those lobes of that diagram and say, if we fix these problems, it would help the Lebanese. It would also help the Syrians. But even if we just focus on helping the sort of the common features, which by strengthening the system actually benefits both groups, rather than falling into this gap where somehow it's a competition between the two. And clearly, I'm sure there are some zones where it is a competition between the two. So I just wondered, in terms of some of the health seeking and some of the strengthening of the primary healthcare system, where you feel, and people like Rabia are using this to say, if we strengthen primary healthcare, we can say this is promoting services for poor Lebanese, and we will also have access for Syrians, which will benefit
Yeah, I
them,
think
rather than feeling
Syrian
that they have
refugees
to.
are already accessing primary healthcare centers in Lebanon, and they are having the service for locals. So I think there are already also initiatives that are happening, but maybe at the parenting skills, maybe families can we can start within the family on raising children to accept others and within the family. So yeah, I think so.
And that was just to add, I think that was raised actually by our participants themselves, who said, even as part of response to the initial Lebanese war, they felt at that point anxiety was really high and their parenting had suffered, and that
Because of
and now the Syrians are saying exactly the same story, but actually for both of them now it's this issue of how, and that would be more community initiative rather than maybe it's not a primary health
it's a
system
community
thing, but
issue. It's at the community level issue.
Any more questions, observations?
Out of the box question, but where are the Palestinians in all of this? So,
Well, this is a very important question. Yeah, I know. We should have included Palestinian.
Yes.
Well, so there's a parallel group doing research on the Palestinians. So actually they are, yes, but
They are not covered here, but they are.
yes, so they act,
sorry, so.
This is our policy.
So they do access a different sort of system. So they rely more on UNRWA for getting their health services, including mental health. So they don't access the public health system. They don't access the primary health care centers in Lebanon. They have their own clinics. So UNRWA has its own clinics for Palestinians access those.
Only Palestinians?
Yes.
Also open to.
It's only
Lebanese?
Palestinians, except for very limited services like vaccinations, in which they allow poor Lebanese to access their centers to get vaccinations, mostly because in the camps there is a minor number of Lebanese who are living within the Palestinian camps as well. So sort of just to prevent any epidemics, so they offer vaccinations to everyone. But that's the only service where they don't ask about the nationality of the people that they are providing care to. So so that's why probably it doesn't make sense because they have different routes of accessing.
I'm quite proud, pleased to be able to say so. It's a really good question, really important question. I think that's been well answered about why not here, because we're looking at a particular system in a sense. But as Karen said, we have done this work with UNRWA very explicitly on the system. But also this is an advert on the 24th and the 25th of October. You might know that we're involved in what's called the Refugee Hosts project, which is run out of UCL. It can be live streamed on Thursday the 24th and Friday the 25th. There's a Refugee Host Conference. And Badawi, for example, the Palestinian camp in the north, is one of the sites for that. And the whole idea of the Refugee Host Project, to which I'm a co-investigator, is that many refugees have previously been hosts, and many hosts have previously been refugees. And the categorizations of Palestine, if you go to Badawi as an example, it is very messy. So at the systems level, we can separate them, but in terms of people's lived lives and interdependencies and histories and obligations, those categories break down. So it's fascinating that sense that the displaced serve, as the Palestinians are doing in places like Badawi, they serve as hosts for new Syrian non-Palestinian displaced.
Yeah, I was just wanted to add a comment, but for example, we can learn a lot from the UNRWA system. For example, for NCDs, how they have this own program, because the people don't have any other option, and they are working on strengthening it. So they have this level of coordination among between primary health care and hospital care and so on and so forth. So and this is, I mean, an added value because there is no as much as complexity as you might have in the Lebanese system. So.
Can I ask you probably a final question? I will look around and oh, sorry, you go first then.
I've got a really mundane question about the group model building and how it works. And are you conducting these groups in Arabic?
Yeah.
And so I was looking at your diagram, and presumably there comes a point where you have to put down the concepts in English. And have you got that? I've got a linguistic background, so you must have a confidence that you are translating correctly kind of the concepts that the people are saying to you from Arabic into English.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
That was one of our biggest.
Yeah, this is our biggest struggle.
And you're a quantitative researcher, so it's qualitative
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah, I don't know how good we were at this, but yeah, they were definitely conducted in Arabic. And for the providers, they were writing the variables in English already. So, but for the community members, no, it was really hard for them to write in English. So it was in Arabic, and then we were going through each word and translating it to the best of our knowledge. Yeah.
So usually there is more than one Arabic-speaking researcher on board. So there's some kind of an agreement that the term that has been translated is as close as possible to the Arabic term.
So my final question was that I think you did a really good job towards the end of the presentation of saying this work has implications, there are recommendations from it and all the rest of it. But this is really just phase one, that there is phase two research. Can you tell us a little bit about your vision for phase two, what's going to happen, but also why that's going to, in terms of what it follows up on and what you found, what enthusiasms you have for phase two,
Yeah.
building on what you've done
So
in phase one.
for phase two, it's a huge phase. We have so many main objectives, but one of them that I'm really finding interesting is that we're gonna do a screening for beneficiaries in primary healthcare centers in Beirut and Bekaa, and we're gonna assess based on the score if they are suffering from depression. As I mentioned in the presentation, we have a huge lack in epidemiological data, so we're gonna have more recent quantitative data on the prevalence of depression. This is one. We're gonna also for the National Mental Health Program, they did the MHGAP training for the providers at the level of the PHCCs, and we developed already surveys in order to assess their practices, which is going to be very beneficial, and we can come up with results that might feed into more recommendations to build on for their strategies. Also, we're working on another thing. We're doing also qualitative interviews with these providers who received this MHGAP training, which I think it's very crucial and important. We're going to assess if it was beneficial for their practice in primary healthcare centers. So I think for phase two, it's building on the model that we already have. And the lack of evidence that we already have, it's going to be an added value and quantitative value. So yeah.
Okay, all the best with that, Ayan. Thanks ever so much for this morning. I think
Thank
we've got the room till 12, but people
Yeah.
are welcome to stay and have a chat and catch up with you. But just for now, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Oh, okay. There's a big red button. Yeah.